Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm making 6 boho and farmhouse inspired planters using Dollar Tree products. Let's get started. For the first planter, I'm using this gray watering can that I picked up at Dollar Tree, and I'm just spray painting it white with Walmart's 97-cent spray paint. Once the planter was dry, I knew I wanted to add some words to this piece. So right here, I'm just sketching out the word bloom. I'm trying to use a Ray Dunn style of font where it's just skinny letters, pretty easy to freehand, but of course you could always print this out and trace it if need be. To trace over the letters, I'm using a black paint pen from Dollar Tree. Now here's where I went wrong. This paint pen dries very slowly and is prone to bleeding, and it just was a mess. It didn't look good. I should have used a Sharpie or a fine paintbrush to paint on the letters, but instead I just completely wiped the whole thing off. Luckily it hadn't dried yet and I was able to start from scratch. And here's where I decided that I would actually give this piece more of an enameled look. So using a cosmetic sponge and some black chalk paint, I'm just going around the edges and adding some black to give it an enameled look, and then I just kind of distress it in various places, also trying to hide any imperfections that might have arose from me painting incorrectly earlier. So instead of writing the words on this time, I decided I would just use this grateful decal and stick it right around the front. Easy peasy, no problem at all. To finish this up, I just added some floral foam on the bottom and stuck in some lamb's ear lavender that I got from Walmart. And here's the finished planter. I think it came out really cute. Looks very modern farmhouse. For the next planter, I'm going to be using this candle holder that I picked up at Dollar Tree, along with these little pearl strip stickers. I didn't need the black lid or the tea light holder, so I just removed those. In order to make sure the stickers stuck onto the jar, I did clean it with some Windex and make sure it was all dry before I adhered them. For the first row of beads, I just placed 2 full strips of the stickers on, and then I did have to cut 1 extra bead to fill in the gap. I did a second row underneath the first one and just repeated the same steps. These stickers did seem to be pretty firmly attached to the glass vase, and I think maybe if they had dried overnight, they would have stayed completely. However, I went right into painting these with some Waverly white chalk paint, and they did move around while I painted them, so I just had to make sure that I pushed them back where I wanted them before I stopped painting for the day. In order to have full coverage on this planter, I did 2 coats of paint. My original plan for this planter was to make it something very smooth and perfect looking, but after I had applied the chalk paint and just some of these beads were a little bit uneven, I decided that I would make it more rustic. So I'm using Waverly antiquing wax, brushing it on and wiping it off just to give it a rustic look. I added this wax to the entire planter until I thought it looked aged enough. To finish it off, I used some greenery that I had picked up at AC Moore back when they were still open. Of course, you can use whatever you have on hand. This is just what I had. And here's the completed look. I think that this is borderline French country style, but I think it still fits right in with farmhouse. This next planter is super duper easy. All I'm doing is using this plastic planter that I got from Dollar Tree along with these blue Medallion decals. I didn't want to just place them directly in the center, so I'm taking the medallions and I'm putting them on like either just over halfway or just under halfway and cutting off the excess and folding it down. That way it looks like a pattern and not just medallions all slapped onto the center. I wanted this pattern to continue onto the bottom tray to make it look more like one whole piece. So I just lined it up and placed that sticker on top. I did have to cut the bottom, some slits in it, that way it would go around the curve, as you can maybe kind of tell what I'm doing here, just so it sat a little more seamlessly. I wanted to make sure that the edges were all sealed in on this, especially because it was so rounded and there was quite a few curves for the bottom pieces. So I just used some matte Mod Podge that I had got from Dollar Tree, and using a foam brush, I painted it on. Once the Mod Podge had dried, I stuck some floral foam from Dollar Tree in there, and then I added some eucalyptus I had on hand. To fill up the bucket, I did scrunch up some newspaper just to take up some space, and then I added some moss that also came from Dollar Tree. And here's the completed planter. I think it came out really cute, really has a boho vibe, and it was so incredibly easy to make. These next pots came from Dollar Tree in a 2-pack, and I'm going to be painting both of them. For the first one, I'm going to be painting it mostly white, and on the bottom I'm just starting with like an asymmetrical curve. Next, I paint the entire area above it white as well, and if you're wondering, I am using Waverly white chalk paint. While the white pot was drying, I just took the second pot and I'm going to be painting that with Waverly chalk paint in the color Inked, mixed with a little bit of white to create a deep charcoal color, and I am painting that in its entirety. Once the paint was all dry, I started with the black pot, and using a Dollar Tree chalk writer pen, I'm just drawing some circles around the bottom. What I love about this look is it looks nice not being even. I don't have to worry in any way that the lines don't line up, because they're not meant to. After I had drawn 3 lines going down the jar, I started drawing some vertical lines of varying lengths. Moving on to the white painted planter, I'm just using a paint pen that came from Dollar Tree, and I'm tracing the bottom line. Again, not being too perfect. It's a little thicker, a little thinner in some space. That's fine. It just kind of adds to the eccentricity of the piece. The next step I'm doing is I'm adding 3 horizontal lines onto the pot, just randomly, not really in any particular pattern. It's got like a loose, natural vibe to it, so you don't have to stress about it. Just wherever the lines land, they land. To finish up these planters, I'm adding some moss to both of them, as well as some succulents that I also picked up from Dollar Tree. And here they are displayed next to some cute hand soap. How adorable is this? I think this would look perfect in a bathroom. It's just so fun and bright. And for the last planter, I'm going to be using one of these flower and garden tins that are a classic staple at Dollar Tree. I didn't want the words flower and garden on these pots, so to remove them, I'm using nail polish remover. This nail polish remover has acetone. I'm not sure if you could use the acetone-free ones. I'm assuming you'd have to use the ones with acetone to actually remove it. I will add that I thought I was done after I cleaned off one side, and then realized that flowers and garden was repeated on the back. Probably not necessary for me to take off both, but I did anyway. And just a little tip, when working with nail polish remover, instead of just throwing the cotton ball in the garbage, place it inside one of your little Ziploc bags, and that'll help keep the smell out of your house and in the bag. So for this entire planter, I'm pretty much just painting, and this is the kind of project I love. So using Waverly chalk paint, first in the color Mineral, I'm using one of these natural sponges, and I'm just like almost dry brushing, except stippling it onto the entire piece. I just want to take away some of that shine and dull it a little bit. For every step, you got to make sure you get a little bit into the lip, because you will see some of that even after you place your flowers in. The rest of these steps kind of follow a similar pattern to what I just did. Now I'm going to be using the ink color in chalk paint and focusing more on the top rim and the bottom rim. I'm going to be adding black. I do put a little bit in the middle, but mostly focusing on what would age the most, which is the edges. To have less harsh lines, I did dip my sponge brush into some water and squeeze it out and then dip it into the paint. This helps you have less harsh lines that are clearly sponge marks on your piece. I also again made sure to get a little bit of the inside of the planter because you might see it when I'm all done. Doing the same process again, I'm now using the color Truffle, focusing mostly where it would age and rust, which would be the bottom and the top, and along that one seam on the back side. And one last color, just for some fun, I'm adding in antique wax chalk paint. This is labeled wax, but honestly, this is just paint. It doesn't really behave like a regular wax would, at least in my opinion. This is a slightly different color brown from the Truffle, just to add another layer of rusty dimension. 100% you could absolutely stop here. I think this looks honestly amazing, but I might be a little bit biased as it is. But I did add a decal to the one side, so I can revert it back to a plain side if I want it, or look at this cute decal. So using this bloom decal that came from Dollar Tree, I just cut out this flower portion because I didn't want the word on there, and I stuck it right on the bucket. I wanted to make sure that sticker wasn't going anywhere, so I took some matte Mod Podge from Dollar Tree, and using that same natural sponge, I just stippled Mod Podge right on top of it because I just didn't want it to have any brush strokes or anything like that to mess up with the flow of the pot. Then once I started doing the sticker, I decided, well, I might as well do the whole thing just in case any kind of sheen gets relayed onto this. I don't want it to just be focused on the one spot. I promise once it dried, you couldn't see any sheen at all. It looked pretty much exactly the same as it did before. And for the last part, I decided to throw some florals into this bucket. The ones that I'm using here are ranunculus from Walmart. They're one of my favorite faux flowers. They're so pretty. And I also threw in some Dusty Millers. These Dusty Millers might look extremely bare too. It's because they are. They've been cut up and used in a bunch of different projects, but I just sporadically put them in the bucket, kind of arranging them how I liked. And here is styled on top of my bookshelf. I love the glow up that it got. This came out so adorable. Let me know if you think it's cute or if it's just me. That's it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up. It really helps my channel grow. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time.